Alabama 1st and 10 on the 12. Again, Houston. He's got a hole. He's over. Alabama touchdown.
I'm just wondering if your listeners know how good a football player you were. I can still see you playing that fullback, knocking those players out of the way. And that, I believe I could have run behind you.
Martin, I can remember when we came to summer and you were playing fullback up there, and I saw you in the weight room and watched you work out in the weight room. If you were strong enough to pick up the whole weight room. I wanted to fix it, and our running back coach didn't take it. Biggest mistake we ever made.
The Martin Houston Show with national championship winning fullback Martin Houston, giving you 1 hour of intense, hard-hitting analysis from an insider's perspective. It's time for the Martin Houston Show on your home for Alabama sports, Tide 100.9, and streaming on the Tide 100.9 app.
All right. Good morning. Welcome into the Martin Houston Show. We're live, local, and ready to get things going. I want to invite you to get in on the conversation on 205-342-9904. That's the Alabama One hotline. Live, local, and ready to get things going. Also, we're broadcasting on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter on the live stream. So join us there. Love to get you in on the conversation. Either one of those ways. We'll make room for you. Once again, this is the Martin Houston Show with Martin and Xavier, and we can't do it without you. This is the Sound of Bama Sports, your show, your team. So let us hear from you, whatever you got to catch up on. Before we get too deep into the program, we want to thank Ryan Fowler for sitting in on Friday. Thank you, my friend, for being there in the clutch, coming off the bench when needed. We really, really appreciate him. Got lots of things to get to. We'll circle back on our thoughts from SEC Media Days. We'll talk about the selections of Alabama and Georgia, where the media thinks they will finish. We'll look at some of the all SEC selections and what your thoughts are there. There's recruiting news from the weekend. So there's a lot to get to. And we'll work it all in, but we don't want to do it without you. So once again, go ahead and get that phone line ready, 205-342-9904, the Alabama One hotline, or go ahead and get your thoughts and comments ready and post them in the live chat. Remember that this is the day that the Lord has made, so let's rejoice and be glad in it. Take some time today to notice someone, love someone, serve someone, be the difference you want to see in the world today. Good morning, Xavier. How you doing, sir?
Doing good. How are you?
Doing well. What you got on your mind, man? Busy weekend.
Yeah, it was, and we didn't get into any of the recruiting news last week. So there's some things going on in the recruiting world. Big things for Bama. Brookwood, 4-star offensive lineman, William Sanders, committed to Bama on Friday. huge get once again. Bama interior of this offensive line this year, and he is the third interior offensive lineman Alabama has had committed to them so far, joining Joseph Ionata and Casey Poe on the inside of that O-line, as well as Ryan Williams in the 2025 class has now has his running mate, Jamie French Jr., fellow five-star, part of that 2025 class as well, out of Florida. A lot of people have been comparing tight, a wide receiver, great route runner, really quick in and out of his breaks. Those are big two commitments, as well as Northridge punter Anderson Green is accepted a preferred walk-on spot in the 2024 class as well. So that so far was the big recruiting news over the weekend, as well as having the number one inside linebacker, Justin Williams, slated to commit later on today. He's got Alabama on his list and Oregon. And, of course, the big one on Wednesday is five-star DeMarcus Riddick, who is currently committed to Georgia, but he is down between Alabama and Georgia for, I guess, a final commitment on Wednesday. So can Bama get him to flip? As well, actually, there's a little bit of news that Auburn is catching some steam on him, but really still between Georgia and Alabama right now for that.
All right. And we'll definitely invite you to join us on Thursday to get back. Where we'll spend a little bit more time digging deeper into the news from last week as well as this week. But that's a quick highlight to catch us up from last week and last weekend. But Pat is on the line, and of course, Pat wants to talk a little recruiting. So we'll get with him. Pat, you're in with Martin and Xavier on the Alabama One hotline. What's on your mind, sir?
Hey, man, you fellas, how y'all doing this morning? I'm down in Foley, Alabama, and it doesn't look good down here, fellas. It really does not. But I'm highly, highly concerned that on the 29th of this month, Perry Thompson is going to rip her heart out. That Auburn has, from what I'm hearing from reliable sources here, that Auburn is going to pull out all the stops, way more money than Scam Newton got, and that Perry Thompson is going to flip on the 29th. X, tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm wrong, X. Please.
Perry Thompson has been a very interesting case so far through this recruiting process. He's been back and forth between Bama and Auburn, even though he's been committed to Bama for a while. I mean, I think Alabama's done everything that they can to keep him, but he is set in his ways on if he's going to stay or not. I mean, maybe he's free. Alabama has a really deep receiving core with who they have on campus right now, who will be back next season, as well as the 2025 class is coming on strong with French and Williams. So maybe he sees that he's going to be stuck between a rock and a hard place once he comes to the Capstone versus down on the Plains.
Pat, I think it has a lot to do with how the quarterbacks play this year. Hugh Freeze has a proven track record of how to use big wide receivers, and what he produced at Ole Miss, and he's probably selling that ticket. He's probably saying, look at the guys your size and beyond, how well they did in my offense. And if you come here, you'll be the star. Nick Saban, on the other hand, has a new quarterback and a new offense, and Tommy Rees has to show that he can do that. And I think Hugh Freeze still has to prove that he can get a quarterback to Auburn as he could right now. I don't know, because he has is the guy from Michigan State a one and done, or does he have 2 years? I think that's huge. Uh,
I
either way, I think
the Kobe.
Hugh Freeze has to get a big commitment at quarterback this year, because if he doesn't, even if Perry changes his mind, um, they're going to recruit all the way through the season, and then you're going to have a whole season in the bag, and Alabama's going to be able to either say, hey, if you come here, you're going to get to play with this guy for a couple more years, or you can go to Auburn where you don't know who the guy's going to be. And that's going to impact your career. So I think Alabama has to have a good offensive. If he flips, I think Alabama has their work cut out. But the other side of the story is you just tell him, hey, you can come here and be the next Julio Jones. Look at our track record of wide receivers that play. They all are in the NFL. Yeah. They all have good careers. Even the guys who don't play at Alabama still get to the league and can have a great career.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think that it may be a battle, but he also may be trying to get some money both ways. I think Alabama may have to up their ante, and it's no longer Cam Newton. It's the way the game's played now.
Exactly. All right, but this guy said that he's an absolute stud, and that he is Julio reincarnated. That he knew knew Julio and went to school with him, and that that this guy's as good. And so I was hearing he was as good, but now that I've talked to somebody in person about it, I'm beginning to wonder. I sure don't want him on the plane.
Hey, listen, one of our viewers, Pat, big Auburn fan and a longtime friend, Arlen Hillier, said freeze warning with triple exclamation point. So that's pretty good.
Have a good one, Martin.
All right. That's well, we're gonna have all types of things coming out of the woodworks now that Alabama had what in our view a couple of down years. I like the freeze warning though. There is a freeze warning when it comes to Perry Thompson. Will he stick with the Tide or will he flip? Has he changed his? Has he set a new date or something, Xavier, or a press conference?
I hadn't heard, but I mean, I might have missed it over the weekend.
Pat said something about the 29th, so I was just wondering.
I think that's when they have their big cat weekend.
Oh, okay.
Is that the end of the month?
Oh,
so
okay.
that might be this coming up weekend.
Yeah, I think the kid's smart to keep all his options open. If he was my son, even with me being a Bama guy, and if he was committed, I would still want him to keep his options open, because playing at Auburn is a little different than when he was than a year ago. The prospects of playing for Hugh Freeze as an offensive player is a little different than playing for Brian Harsin. So can't blame the kid for what he's looking at, but I think this year's offense makes a big difference for Alabama. Hey, we need to get the break here. Coming back on the other side, we'll spend a little time talking about SEC media days and what that means for the Alabama Crimson Tide. Do you agree or disagree with the way the voting went for the teams and for the players? 31 years and counting, the SEC media days. The SEC they're 9 and 23. 22. 9 and 22. They've only got it right 9 times.
Let's make it 9 and 23.
Yeah, I was being prophetic in my announcement. We'll come back on the other side to keep the conversation going right here on the Martin Houston Show with Martin and Xavier.
Tide 100.9 traffic.
From the Townsend Nissan Traffic Center, no active wrecks and traffic pretty quiet around town this morning. Now, if you do see conditions, give me a call, 205-886-8886. Go grab a summertime savings at your hometown Nissan dealer, Townsend Nissan of Tuscaloosa. I'm Captain Ray.
Let's fiesta our way through July at Pearl River Resort. Stop by Fridays and Saturdays for your chance to earn pieces from this special cookware collection. The set includes a quesadilla maker, rice cooker, tortilla bowl maker, and a slow cooker. This perfect combination is sure to make you the hostess with the mostest. Pearl River Resort, always making you shine. Must be 21 to gamble.
Delivery's at the door. Can someone please unlock?
It's been an eventful afternoon with a spike in bookings at Claudia's event space.
We'd love to host Mermaid Fest.
She was already planning on having more event planners on hand.
500? That's a lot of tails.
Indeed can help her hire great people fast.
I need Indeed.
Indeed you do. Our hiring platform instantly connects you with quality candidates, and you can schedule and conduct virtual interviews right from the Indeed dashboard. Visit Indeed.com/credit and get $75 towards your first sponsored job. Terms and conditions apply.
Tide 100.9 Tuscaloosa weather.
Good supply of sunshine today. Tuscaloosa's high 93. For tonight, fair with the low at 68. The weather stays hot and dry tomorrow and Wednesday. Partly to mostly sunny both days with highs in the mid-90s between 94 and 97. I'm James Spann on the ABC 3340 Weather Center on Tide 100.9. It's 68 degrees in Tuscaloosa.
The sound of Bama sports. Your show, your team. The Martin Houston Show on your home for Alabama sports. Tide 100.9 and streaming on the Tide 100.9 app.
Welcome back into the Martin Houston Show with Martin and Xavier on Tide 100.9 on the radio dial. Going to get a little audio from Coach Nick Saban talking about the coordinators as we prepare to talk a little SEC media days. Nick Saban up in Nashville as the SEC media days beginning to take a little jaunt around, I guess, SEC territory. As next year they'll be out not in Austin, but in Dallas, Texas. It's kind of lost a little bit of the craziness of the Hoover, the Hoover Galleria Mall. I think it used to be Alabama SEC media days, and now with it being in these other places, I don't get this exact same feeling as I used to, but still big time day and the official kickoff to the college football season here around the South. Lots of comments coming out, and we'll talk a little bit. Excuse me, but let's talk about the teams as a whole first, and then we'll talk about the different players picked. As Alabama actually ended up with quite a few guys in different levels on the first, second, and third team. I want to break down where we think some guys who may bump up and move into that category, or who may jump up on second and third team that's not listed right now. So, but 5 different selections on the number 1 first team in some variety. So we'll talk about that. But SEC preseason poll since 1992, 31 years. Only 9 times have they got it right. Will they get it right this time as the SEC East? Georgia got 265 first place votes. Tennessee got 14. South Carolina, I tell y'all you need to know, South Carolina's picked 3rd with 3 votes. Kentucky got 1. Florida 0, Missouri 0. Vanderbilt got 8 votes for first place. They didn't get any votes for anything else because they're dead last. And
I want those names.
That was probably some type of that's the 8 media guys that were from the Nashville area. Clark Lee has paid them off. But anyway, and they still ended with the least points of anybody, and they had 8 first place votes. So that tells you that nobody else voted them anywhere else but last. So, but Georgia clearly the toast of the town, with Tennessee in people's eyes not having much of a chance based on the media of upsetting the apple cart. So you have to kind of tend to agree with that. Then Alabama, from a first place vote standpoint in the Western Division, got 165. LSU got 117. But what this tells me is when you look at the point total X, it's 1899 to 1838, which means that more people picked Alabama number 1, but undoubtedly a lot more people picked Alabama 3rd, 4th, and 5th, or somewhere in that range, because the point total being that close means that a lot of people think that LSU, and I'm trying to figure out who do they have, the second team or the third team, because they had to have picked Alabama to not finish in the top 2, or you'd have seen that gap kind of match itself. But what are your thoughts of LSU? Let me give the order in the West. LSU, Texas A&M got 1 first place vote, but they were the 3rd team. Ole Miss, Arkansas got 3 first place votes. Auburn got 4. Mississippi State got 1. Ole Miss, the only team not getting a first place vote. And I think Ole Miss is the only team in the West that hasn't made it to Atlanta at some point, I think. So, or of the original crew. Huh?
Oh, yeah. Of the original, yes.
Crew. So, what are your thoughts on the SEC West, and how they picked that?
I'm surprised people were expecting Alabama to be, quote unquote, I guess, that bad. If you picked LSU represent the West, makes sense. Alabama lost to them last year. They represented the West complete, but Alabama dominated Ole Miss. They dominated Mississippi State. They beat Texas A&M with their backup court. Like there was no competition in the West outside of LSU. So a little surprised that it appears that a lot of people have Bama not finishing it number 2, if not number 1, based off of the success that Alabama has. This is just a 1-year gap away from playing for a national championship and a 2-year gap from winning one. So it's a little surprising.
Yeah, and that's what you look at it from the standpoint of the point total. And like I said, you have to kind of think that some people didn't put Alabama as number 2 because Alabama had such a clear gap at number 1, which was a surprise to me. The point total being as close doesn't surprise me, because I expected it to be close between Alabama and LSU from who would win the West. I expect people to fall in love with LSU because of what they brought to the table last year, how they finished the season. But there's such a gap between LSU and Georgia last year. And people are assuming because they played Alabama close and didn't play Georgia close that there's a big gap between Alabama and Georgia. And I don't think that's the case. I think Alabama had a really, really off game against LSU offensively. One of the lower point totals of recent years. If I'm not mistaken, I haven't looked at exactly where that point total falls, but counting the fact that it was an overtime game total, I think it's probably one of the lower output offensively that Alabama's had in a regulation game, much less an overtime game. With that said, you get to the predicted SEC champs. Georgia has 181 points. Alabama has almost exactly half of that, a little over half of that at 62. And LSU has half of Alabama's point total in prediction in 31. So Georgia, the clear favorite to win it all. What are your thoughts in terms of Georgia being the clear favorite to take the SEC, be back-to-back SEC titles, but which more than likely, barring some catastrophic season in the SEC, it would be them playing for their third straight national title. Indu, go ahead.
When you look at it, that the back-to-back national champions, the defending SEC champs, they probably should be the favorite because of what Alabama's replacing as well. Is LSU going to be more than a one-hit wonder? Same with Tennessee. I just based off of what we've seen in the past 2 years. Clear favorite, that might be a little bit of a stretch for me. I like Tennessee. I think Tennessee's going to be able to do some things if Joe Milton can play smart football, but and be able to do more than just throw deep bombs, which we know he's amazing at. I think Tennessee can give him a run for the money, but just that big of a gap, I'm not so sure.
Yeah, and when you look at it, it's possible that a two-loss Alabama team could still represent the West. Alabama could, and I'm not thinking it's going to happen. Alabama could lose to Texas early, and then lose to Tennessee back-to-back seasons, and still win the West and represent the West. That's why I say Alabama. Goes. I don't see Alabama having back-to-back seasons where they lose to two SEC teams. But I could see, a potential there if they got surprised and then someone upset them here. I don't think they're going to lose any SEC games this year. One of Nick Saban's few years to run through the SEC undefeated. When you look at how dominant he's been, you would think that would happen more often. But when you look at the Tennessee division, the Eastern Division, I think Curtis Moore says it best, and I'm going to circle back to the overall championship in just a minute. He says, and that's why I'm glad, Curtis Moore II, that's why I'm glad they're getting rid of divisions. Ridiculous how easy Georgia's path has been in recent years. And when you think about it, Georgia predicted to win it. Who else out of the SEC West would be predicted to win that conference or would get close to the same number of votes, if not more votes? If you were to remove Georgia from the Eastern Division and picked any SEC schools, which ones could you pick that would possibly win the East?
Bama and LSU. Arkansas would probably make a run for it in the East. Ole Miss, if Lane Kiffin doesn't call stupid plays, it's probably 3 to 4 teams.
I would pick, even though I picked Texas A&M over everybody in a head-to-head, except for it'd be a one-game season with Texas A&M and Tennessee, in my opinion. You could say that's similar for Ole Miss. I'd put Arkansas, and I'd take Arkansas over South Carolina, Kentucky, Florida, Missouri, and Vanderbilt. And it'd be a one game against Tennessee. I'd take even Hugh Freeze this year over these other schools with the exception. Now, that doesn't mean that I didn't say that they would win those, but I could see those teams. So just about everybody, with the exception of maybe Mississippi State, you could see having a chance to beat everybody else in the Eastern Division with the one-game matchup with Tennessee. That's That's how bad the East is. Now, that doesn't mean that it's going to play out that way, because Shane Beamer ended the season like playing really, really strong. So it's a possibility that that could continue. Coming back on the other side, I'm going to give you my thoughts on the SEC champions and why I'm hoping that they missed it once again, and the record will be 9-23. But I'm not going to do it blindly. I'm going to do it with hopefully some legit thoughts and insights on why I think the media has fallen in love with the three-peat for Georgia, and why Alabama may be able to throw a wrinkle into that, at least throw a wrinkle into them having to beat Bama twice to get to the championship. Coming back on the other side, we'll keep the conversation going right here on your home for Alabama sports. This is the Martin Houston Show, and we're able to do this because of great folks over at Billy's Cooking. Billy's Cooking, I don't mean to bother nobody, but I just can't help myself. 3702 Alabama Avenue, Northeast Tuscaloosa, Alabama. That's located directly across from Hope High School. Open Wednesday through Sundays with Wing Wednesday, 50-cent wings, Fish Friday, and Soul Food Sunday. That's Billy's Cooking Restaurant.
Tide 100.9 traffic.
From the Townsend Nissan Traffic Center, no active wrecks and traffic pretty quiet around town this morning. Now, if you do see conditions, give me a call, 205-886-8886. Go grab a summertime savings at your hometown Nissan dealer, Townsend Nissan of Tuscaloosa. I'm Captain Ray.
Get a great deal on Kubota M-Series utility tractors. Our powerful, versatile lineup is rated #1 in durability and owner experience. So whether you need to mow, rake, stack, lift, or pull, get it done right with Kubota M-Series utility tractors. Right now, get select Kubota M-Series utility tractors for 0 down, 0% APR for up to 60 months. Now through September 30th. See us or go to KubotaUSA.com for full disclaimer.
Tuscaloosa Tractor, 3921 Skyland Boulevard East. Don't you buy no ugly tractor.
My friend and I are taking a trip to Mexico this year, but neither of us speak Spanish. So we downloaded Babbel and started learning Spanish fast.
Want to start getting conversational in another language in as little as 3 weeks? Babbel's quick 10-minute lessons were designed by language experts to be the most efficient and effective way to learn a new language.
¿Cómo te llamas?
¿Cómo te llamas?
Babbel, language for life. Celebrating 10 million subscriptions sold. Now try Babbel for free at Babbel.com. That's Babbel.com.
Interact with the Martin Houston Show by calling us at 205-342-9904 or tuning into the Martin Houston Show on Facebook.
I think the most important thing is probably relationships. I think legal. So to have good relationships in terms of how you present, how you motivate, and the players trusting and respecting in the things that you're trying to implement, the things that we do, that they trust and believe that that's going to help them be successful. So that's number one. Number two, we've tried to mitigate the changes that a new coordinator would create for players by trying to keep the same system. And that's a little challenging sometimes when you have new coaches, because they have to learn a certain amount to be able to implement the system so it doesn't change completely for the players. But I'm really pleased with the two new coordinators that we have. Kevin Steele obviously has been with us before, so he kind of understands the program and the expectation. And, you know, Tommy Reese is one of the brightest young guys I've seen for a long time in this business. So he's been a great addition and brought a lot of positives to the offensive side of the ball. In terms of his ideas and how he relates to players, how he presents to players, his energy and enthusiasm on the field has been contagious. And I think I see a great trust in our players with Tommy and what he tries to do from a leadership standpoint on offense.
All right, that's Nick Saban talking about the offensive and defensive coordinators and talking about Tommy Reese's ability to connect and build relationships with the players. I think Saban missed some of that, X. I think that the offensive side of the ball, where you need a lot of guys getting on the same page, running the same play, I think Bill O'Brien was an absolute disconnect in terms of that from a personality standpoint, professional approach standpoint. I think that's one of Saban's biggest mistakes in hires of his career. And I think it cost him at least one national title and possibly two, because everybody, says Georgia is the clear-cut champion of the toast of the town because they've won two national titles. But the reality of it is, the one that they won, Alabama could have won. Didn't win it, but could have won. And then, of course, you look back, then people say, well, there's some Alabama won it, Georgia could have won. Exactly. So to me, the program should be on par with each other, right? If you go back and look at the era of Kirby and Saban and Kirby, they should be on par with each other. It's just that Georgia's got the last two. But the difference to me, what's amazing is how when Alabama beat Georgia, no one cut back on Kirby's ability to get back there, but they have sold out Alabama's ability to get back there. Well, if you go back 2 years ago, after Alabama won in 2020, people were still expecting Georgia to challenge, even though we had Bryce Young coming in, right? And Georgia had who? Who did Georgia have at quarterback? McDaniels, right?
It's some Ben, or technically they had JT
Daniels. And then Stetson Bennett, and then JT Daniels, and then JT Daniels and Stetson Bennett. And until, you see what I'm saying? So everybody, and Daniels had done nothing that made you think he was going to be great. He just had a bunch of hype coming out of high school. But everybody still gave Georgia a chance. You fast forward, they win 2 in a row, which they easily could be 1-1 in the last 2 years. Okay? Alabama can look at the last 2 years and go, hey, if we don't lose what's the name in this game, then we win a national title. And then last year, Georgia was the best team in the country last year.
Hands down.
But Alabama would have gave them a run for it if they had got to play again. So you come to this year, and everybody acts like this year's Georgia team is the Georgia team from 2 years ago or last year. They act like this Alabama team is the team that played only against LSU. It's as if this Alabama team has no talent, no ability when they're comparing them. And so I look at it and ask you this question. Yes, I would probably, if I was not an Alabama guy, I probably wouldn't look for this difference. So if I was just a media guy, I possibly would just go Georgia over Alabama based on those 2 years. But I would say it was a toss-up. And here's why I ask. Are you going to you have a choice now. You got Mike Bobo and Carson Beck. Or do you take Tommy Rees and Jalen Milroe, or Tommy Rees and either one of the other guys? Simpson, what's the kid's name from Notre Dame?
Buckner.
Or Buckner. Everybody acts like Georgia's coming into this thing with a proven quarterback. I mean, the reason people aren't picking Alabama is because they have not settled on their quarterback. That's what they say. Alabama doesn't have a quarterback. Well, who does Georgia have at quarterback? Carson Beck.
Honestly. But he's an unknown commodity. He's looked good at moments in at the end of games, but we've seen guys do that before and it not translate. So, I mean, defense that they've had over the last 2 years to get him out of bad spots and keep the game in a blowout fashion because you had no other choice. And then, like you said, Mike Bobo. I'm taking Tommy Reese in any quarterback over Mike Bobo in any quarterback just because I don't think Mike Bobo is a very good play caller. And this was almost seems like a desperation hire, even though you would think Kirby would be able to go out and get a top tier offensive coordinator to balance out that defense. That's the most
Blind
shocking.
Squirrel, is Mike Bobo and Kirby Smart former teammates? I don't know. I know that Bobo is a former. I think they may have been teammates. I'm not sure. And those types of hires that get you in trouble sometimes. So, but I'm not sure, and I'm not saying that that's what it is. But here's another thing. Curtis Moore II says the following, and I'm going to see if I can give a rebuttal. And Blind Squirrel Sports says, yes, they were teammates. So that may be why he went with that easy hire. He knows him. He was already in the system. This is his version of coaching rehabilitation. So maybe that's why Mike Bobo got the job. And, hey, it may prove to be great. But that's yet to be seen. And that's why I say it shocks me how everybody acts like Kirby's coming into this season with a proven offensive team. But the part no one's talking about is that defensive team. Defense. Is Georgia the same defense? Can you lose every single defensive player from 2 years ago? Most of the guys who have played, with the exception of the starters from last year, a couple new starters last year, none of these players have started. So it's going to be interesting to see. Curtis Moore II said, to your point, Xavier Houston Sr., I know you mentioned Tennessee possibly with a chance to take it from Georgia, but I disagree due to the fact that hypo scheme he did on us ain't going to work against the ferocious front seven that Georgia provides pressure with. QB simply just must have time. Did Georgia lose the key to that ferocious front with the fact that they lost a couple of key players off of that front? Will Georgia's front be as ferocious? And if not, will they be able to provide the back end coverage, which they should be better at DB than they were definitely 2 years ago, and maybe even better than they were last year. But do they have the same front seven in the pressure acts?
And they lost their best DB.
So of course, they got a local kid from Alabama that we let get out from Tuscaloosa over there that's pretty good.
Yes, he is.
So we don't want. I mean, we want him to do the best because he's a local kid, but we don't want him to be shut down against us. So, but anyway,
he's got 2 national championships. He don't need
that's
a
right.
third.
That's right. But Blind Squirrel Sports says allegedly I'm a little nervous about the transition from Monk into Bobo. I would be if I was Georgia for several reasons. One is another thing to throw in their X on this Georgia situation is this. The quarterback from last year was roommates with who? His roommate, Bowers, and Bennett were roommates. That you don't understand what that means for a quarterback and a receiver. They had a connection that was hard to stop. Does Carson Beck have that same connection? Number one. Number two is Carson Beck will be a guy, he would have developed relationships with who? What was his name? Deck?
Guys in his class.
What's the young tight end name that's going to be really good as well? Number 14?
Hill.
Do what? Delp. I knew it was something with a D. Delp. Delp, not that. Delp. He's going to have a connection with him. We'll talk about how those connections and those small things and the fact that they're going to have that new coordinator could give Alabama an open door opportunity to upset the apple cart or maybe go along with what it's always been when it comes to the SEC media picking the team. We'll come back. We'll talk about that. We'll also just highlight a couple players, and then we'll add DC to the conversation on tomorrow to go through the entirety of the player list. You listen to the Martin Houston Show with Martin and Xavier right here on your home for Alabama Sports.
Tide 100.9 traffic.
From the Townsend Nissan Traffic Center, no active wrecks and traffic pretty quiet around town this morning. Now, if you do see conditions, give me a call, 205-886-8886. Go grab a summertime savings at your hometown Nissan dealer, Townsend Nissan of Tuscaloosa. I'm Captain Ray.
Here's what's trending on the Tuscaloosa thread.
Good Monday morning. Authorities in Hale County spent Sunday looking for 33-year-old Colby H. Dean. The white male walked into the woods near Westerville Lumber Mill in Moundville yesterday morning. After a lengthy search, Dean was located around 4:30 this morning walking down a road. His condition has not yet been released by Hale County authorities. Click TuscaloosaThread.com for more local news, sports, and weather coverage. It's absolutely free. Don Hartley, Town Square Media, Tuscaloosa.
Delivery's at the door. Can someone please unlock?
It's been an eventful afternoon with a spike in bookings at Claudia's event space.
We'd love to host Mermaid Fest.
She was already planning on having more event planners on hand.
500? That's a lot of tails.
Indeed can help her hire great people fast.
I need Indeed.
Indeed you do. Our hiring platform instantly connects you with quality candidates, and you can schedule and conduct virtual interviews right from the Indeed dashboard. Visit Indeed.com/credit and get $75 towards your first sponsored job. Terms and conditions apply.
Keep it locked into Tide 100.9 for more of the Martin Houston Show with Martin Houston and X's and O's Sports, Xavier Houston.
All right, let's keep things rolling right here on your home for Alabama Sports. Harvest Church, love God, love people. That's our motto. Love God, love people. And we invite you to join us. Be our guest. Come now. Everything is ready. So come on out, and we'll be expecting you on Wednesday at 6 for the meal, 6:30 teaching time, or come on out on Sunday, 9 a.m. Bible study with a 10 o'clock word and worship time. And also go ahead and mark your calendar for August 6th at 7:30. Great breakfast, great time of food, fun, and fellowship. As Harvest Church, love God, love people. All right. It's just a couple comments we were talking about. Curtis Moore II said, maybe Georgia ain't worried about their quarterback controversy because the schedule is a cakewalk compared to Alabama's path. I get that to get to the championship game, but can that cakewalk schedule end up costing Georgia, X?
It definitely can, because either way, if they cakewalk through the regular season, is Carson back, or if it ends up being Brock quarterback situation plays out throughout the course of the season, is that going to get them prepared for an Alabama and LSU or whoever wins the West in the championship game? And then say they win that, it's not going to be as easy as it was. They already had a dogfight against Ohio State, but it's definitely not going to be as easy as it was in the national championship game for them this past year. So, because that defense, I think, is going to be really good, but it's not going to be what it has been the last 2 years because of who you lost. I mean, the number of second, third round draft picks off of that defense is absolutely insane. I don't see it.
Yeah, and I would ask you this. How many national championships has Nick Saban went undefeated in? His first one and his last one. His first one at Alabama and his last one at Alabama. But what did both of those seasons present? Tough opponents all year. When we won in 2009, we had to play in the SEC. We didn't have a cakewalk. 2020, tough SEC season. What happened in all the other easy cakewalk SEC seasons?
Dropped one
Alabama
game.
didn't finish. When they've had a cakewalk, they have been upset at some point. One time they had a cakewalk and they got to Auburn and got beat for their three-peat. They walked the dog on everybody all year, and then had a tough game down in Auburn and weren't ready for it. They just weren't ready for it. And how many other times did that happen? You see what I'm saying? So sometimes these cakewalk seasons get you undefeated, but they don't get you prepared for that 3-game run that Georgia will have to go through to get there. They will have to go through an SEC champion, and then they'll have to go through some other champion, which could be the same team. It's possible that Alabama and Georgia could both come into that game undefeated. And both of them play again the next week. I mean, I could see that happening. I could see if LSU run the dog and beat Alabama, I could see LSU being undefeated and in the top 3 or 4 after a loss to a Georgia team, or vice versa. Is Georgia ready? Will Georgia be ready for that? That's the question. But an even better question that we may need to spend a little time on. I love this. Curtis Moore II, Xavier said, talking back to Blind Squirrel, he said, Monken to Bobo downgrade is just like our downgrade when we went from Sark to O'Brien, in his opinion. My question is Sark to O'Brien a bigger gap and bigger drop than Monken to Bobo, or vice versa?
Man, that's a good question. Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I mean, Bill O'Brien was a very capable offensive coordinator. It was just like the game management side of it was bad. That's what makes that is, because you look at the yards, Bryce Young setting records, all of that still happened. 2 1,000-yard receivers, a 1,200-yard rusher. It was the product of that first season from O'Brien. It's just the game call management of the play calling, and I think you could see something very similar from Monken to Bobo. So
I would tell you,
we'll have to see how the season
I
plays
would
out.
tell you that Sark is superior to Monken. Monken improved, but I don't think you were right home about Monken 4 years ago. I think the last 2 years, when he finally got settled on a quarterback in that offense, I would say that Monken improved. But I think that Sark is a higher level offensive coordinator than Monken. You put them both up for a job. I don't think anybody's taking Monken over Sark, because Sark can run some of the same stuff that Monken can, but he also can be explosive and creative. I think Monken does a good job of taking the old school style of offense and making it relevant. I think Sark can play in both parts, old school and new school. So Sark higher. I think that O'Brien is better than Bobo. So the gap may be the same. I would say the ceiling on Sark is higher and the floor on Bobo is lower, but the gap may be the same. That makes sense, X?
Yeah, it does.
Like dropping down to O'Brien, it was a huge drop, but the floor was higher than Bobo's. The ceiling is higher than Bobo's ceiling. The gap may be the same between the two. And that leaves a great question. Will this Georgia offense be able to produce at a championship level? We don't know that, but everybody assumes it will, regardless. So we'll talk more about that on tomorrow. We'll also add in DC Capstone Report, and we'll talk about some of those players, the three that he picked for all SEC. You picked, I picked. J.C. Latham, Dallas Turner, and Kool-Aid McKinstry all made the first team X. No surprise there. I said that Will Reichert would make it as the kicker, and he did. And then Kool-Aid McKinstry made it as the return specialist. So that's 5 guys on first team. I'm excited to talk about the second team guys and the third team guys that I think may perform to be first team guys and or second team guys. And we'll talk about those guys on tomorrow. Closing thoughts, we got about 30 seconds, X.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting. Like you said, we've covered a little bit of recruiting today. We'll get back into that again on Thursday with some big names coming up this week, as well as, hey, I think there's a guy that isn't on that first team who I think could end up being the best player on that offense this year.
Yeah, I think there's some guys that are going to make some moves during the season. Looking forward to talking about who we think they are. We'll add DC to that conversation. And hey, remember this has been the Harvest Church 2-minute warning. Harvest Church, loving God, loving people. Hey, come visit us now because everything is ready for you. Be out there, be the difference you want to see, and trust in the Lord always. Lean not your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your paths. And hey, I want to invite you to get in on the Getaway giveaway. Go check out alabama1.org and find out how you can win the Getaway. $1,000 weekend, $5,000 grand prize. Hey, I'm Martin Houston. That's Xavier Houston. That's Noah Haynes for the Martin Houston Show with Martin and Xavier. Have a blessed one. Roll Tide out there, everybody.
It's a celebration. It's a celebration. Celebrate good times. Come on. Let's celebrate.
Thank you for listening to the Martin Houston Show on your home for Alabama sports. Tide 100.9 and streaming on the Tide 100.9 app. Tide.